Call and call your friends, call your neighbors, call the family and tell them Ron and Roman and Reason for Reason is on the air. So, this week has been a kind of tough week for a number of people. We lost a legend in the R&B world from the Delphonics. The founding member, William Hart, passed away. He was 77 years old, I think. And then the Trump family, Ivana Trump, died under somewhat mysterious circumstances, I'd say. So just send condolences out to those family members. Let them know that they have our condolences and that we're thinking about them. Some more so than others, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, last week we talked about a topic that is so important and something that we need to discuss more and we need to take action. We talked about the overturning of the Roe v. Wade, that landmark decision. That case was decided in 1973. And here we are, some 50 years later, and it's been overturned. And we're going backwards in so many areas. People think of this particular issue as a woman's issue, an issue that doesn't affect everyone. But I think it's important that we look at it a little bit differently. I think we should look at this. Have we been, and are we now in the new civil rights struggle? Because this goes beyond just abortion. If you think about it, some of the hard-fought, hard-earned gains from the civil rights struggle are being systematically wiped away. So, it's not just abortion, it's voting rights. It's our right to privacy. And I just saw this the other day. The FDA wants to ban menthol cigarettes. So since when do bans work? I mean, they banned alcohol and it only increased alcohol consumption, right? So, and not only do they want to ban cigarettes, they say they want to reduce the cancer risk, but they only want to ban the menthol cigarettes. So in the same printout that I have, it says that of people who smoke menthol cigarettes, 90% are African American. So what is it you're trying to say to the African American community? That, and then you take into account that Louis Gohmert, one of the ranking Republican senators from Texas, said now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, we need to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, which was separate but equal, as well as Brown versus the Board of Education. So we are, or let me ask you ladies, trouble for this era.
We are.
Absolutely.
We are. We absolutely are. And I think we touched on it a little bit last week. Just trying to warn people not to be sideswiped into believing that this is just a pro-choice issue. This is a civil rights issue. And women's rights are human rights.
Absolutely.
And so this is just the beginning of something much, much bigger. We have to stay alert and aware, to be careful that we don't start to watch them reverse constitutional rights, because this was a constitutional right for women. So we're in a dangerous place right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, now granted, I'll show you how old I am. 73 is the year I was born.
Wow.
So I'm the youngin'. However, with that said, knowing the history and being aware of what we're seeing now, and being a part of some of these movements, especially with the Roe versus Wade. My husband and I actually attended some protests. It's scary. It's scary to see the reaction in people's faces and how they are addressing this, because it is more than just this. This is people need to understand you can't have the wool pulled over your eyes, because this is just the beginning of reverting everything that has been put in place to give everyone the human rights,
That's right.
So I agree with you. I think we are reverting back everything that the civil rights movement was involved in and was able to push through. And this is going to be a slowly but surely. This right here is just the beginning of we were able to accomplish this. Now, what else can we do to revert back? We already have an issue here in our country. As far as, just with the political climate, with the religious climate, it's just getting very pervasive where people are now starting to take sides. We have a civil revolution going on in our own country. So just imagine how this is playing into the role in the minds of people to revert things back that we've had in place for over 50 years.
You know what I think? I think that for someone like Dr. King, who's looked upon as being a civil rights icon, and he is, but I think in Dr. King's final years, I think Dr. King became more of a visionary. And I think he was more of a humanitarian than just a civil rights leader. Dr. King talked about things that were well above the pay grade of a simple country preacher. And I think that Dr. King, maybe he saw in 68 that this country would take back everything that it had given. And, there's a historical precedent for that, because how many treaties had this country entered into with the Native Americans? And every last one of those treaties was broken, systematically broken. And now the people that, I shouldn't say people, but I guess the mindset that wanted to deny people in the civil rights era the right to vote, the right to be treated as a human, the right to equality. That mentality has resurfaced. And maybe Dr. King saw that on the horizon. And he kind of gave us maybe subtle warnings that we need to be vigilant. Because now, I guess with this happening, and it's been happening now, probably going back to, I guess, 2001, because that was the time of course, 9/11 and the destruction of the World Trade Center towers. So from that time to this, we've lost a lot of our rights in terms of privacy. So now the FBI can just show, and prior to they need a search warrant, now they just show up. They do things like extraordinary rendition. So if you're accused of being a terrorist, even before you are convicted in a court of law, they send you to another country. They drop you there, and you have no rights because you're outside of the United States. They basically strip you of your citizenship, drop you in another country, and say you're on your own. When you go through the airport now, you have to go through so many layers of security, and we're no safer than we were on September 10th, 2001. So what should our next move be? We tried the political, I guess we tried politics, but our leaders are bought and paid for. So what should be our next move in addressing this new civil rights struggle?
There's a couple things that come to mind to me, and I know when listening to last week, we talked about the political climate, and the question was asked, what do we do now? And I feel that awareness, education is needed on what can happen, or what is happening that, they're just not telling us yet. Because let me tell you, once they hit the floor of the House and Senate, there's already been discussions had on what they're doing. We got to hit the local levels and make sure we understand what our leaders are actually voting on and what they're thinking in their minds and what they're actually doing. Because people can tell you, I disagree with this. Oh, yeah, feed you everything, right? Sell you in, and then they go vote, and it's the opposite of what they told you.
Right.
So we already know that. That's how it works. So we have to be very vigilant and understanding at the local level where our leaders are on their decision process, on their thinking. And I feel that we have a responsibility to educate people on what's going on and what could happen if they move forward with the decisions that they're going to be making, because it's coming. I hate to say it, but it's coming. And then, it is a political game. It's also, so we have to, in, November, we gotta be very clear the direction of this country by the leaders that we put into office. I hate to say it, they're the ones that are going to be making these final decisions. The House, the Senate, it starts from the local level up. So we have to be very clear. As much as we say it's not really, we don't feel politically we can do anything, we can. We have to vote the right people in that have the best interest of the people.
But do we ever have a candidate that truly has the best interest of the people? Now, here in Pennsylvania, we have Dr. Oz running for Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Oz has said he is pro-life and is supported by Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then for governor, we have John Fetterman, and I believe his name is Mike Mastriani.
Yeah.
Now, Mike Mastriani has said abortion should be criminalized, and there are no exceptions for rape or incest. He also said that if he does not, essentially what he's saying is, if he doesn't like the outcome of an election, he can unilaterally overturn the results of that election. So these are the people that I guess maybe corporate America is sponsoring.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think that the average person in Pennsylvania wants to go cast their vote, which is their constitutional right,
Mm-hmm.
and then have a governor unilaterally say, well, no, I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the outcome of this vote. So we're just going to negate your right to vote, your will, the will of the people, and I'm going to put in who I think should be best in a position. So in terms of politics is so far removed from the average person nowadays. Do they hear our voices in Washington or even in Harrisburg?
I think that what Stephanie said is paramount. Number one, education.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two, we have the ability to train up someone that we want in office. So we have to identify potential leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Our community has to identify potential leaders. We have to develop them, and then we have to support them through this campaign process. And then something else that was mentioned is that education piece. And so many people don't know exactly what's going on. Like I was telling you in the parking lot, that yesterday they passed 2 bills, the House, to reinstate the right for women to choose, the right to go get an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday they passed, one is called the Women's Health Protection Act, and this protects the woman and healthcare providers who will actually perform abortions. And then the other one was the Insuring Access to Abortion Act, which just what we talked about last week, which was if a woman travels from one state that's banned abortion to another state to get an abortion, she can't be arrested, and the provider can't be arrested. And how about this piece? The computer networks that are now all joined together, that won't be a part of that system. You won't be able to pull that information up.
That's interesting you say that, because that was the concern of the access or access that these government officials or the law office, whoever, to see this is right to privacy, right? Right to privacy. So what people don't understand is that it's not just about Roe versus Wade. It's not just about that. It's the right to privacy, because that means you have the ability to see what I'm doing with my caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because this is beyond this, and this is why I say don't get the wool pulled over your eyes, because this is much greater than this. The right to privacy is a huge factor in this. You're not going to have a right to privacy based on the decisions they make, because how do they know I'm going to get an abortion? The only records are in the medical records, right? So now you have the ability to see what I'm doing with my healthcare professional. Because everything is electronic nowadays. Exactly.
There's nothing written down on paper.
Right. And you see the joining of systems now. If you go into, say, a Guy Singer and Now all of a sudden, Lehigh Valley, Geisinger, like you can merge the records
Mhm.
so that they can see what's going on across providers.
Everything is under the Epic system.
Yep.
But now you raised a point about yesterday, I guess Congress passing two pieces of legislation or attempting to pass. You said
Attempting.
they were short of a couple of
It
votes.
passed the House, it went to Senate,
Mhm.
right? But in order for it to be passed in the Senate, they need 2 Republican votes.
Yeah.
Right.
And as
Yeah.
you and I were discussing, the
Unlike
probability of us getting 2 Republicans who are all standing up and announcing we are pro-life
Mhm.
is slim to none.
Yeah.
But, you know, even if they did pass this piece of legislation, it is federal law.
Mhm.
Do the states have to follow federal law? Because let's be realistic now. Slavery had been abolished, but some of the states were still
Mhm.
running slaves in and out of the United States.
Mhm.
I mean, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863. It was 2 years before people
yep.
were totally emancipated.
Yep.
The federal law was there,
Mm-hmm.
but the states simply ignored the federal law.
How about this? We lived in the state that was the last state to abolish slavery.
Mhm.
Pennsylvania was the last state.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right.
Right.
And this was 2 years later.
Mhm.
So you're right.
So, you know, this happened throughout the civil rights struggle. Federal law said one thing, but states said, no, this is a states' rights issue. So we will determine how we treat certain people, how we handle certain situations. We are going to ignore the federal mandate.
And you're going to have states that are going to do that. You're definitely going to have states. They're doing it today.
Mhm.
And they're making decisions right now on what's an abortion, what, what's in it, what's not in it, what's part of it, or what, the decisions that made, especially Texas. I mean, think about what Texas is doing. So I agree with you. I still feel the states are going to make those decisions regardless.
Mhm.
You're right.
And that's a huge problem.
Yep.
When you try to have, I guess what I'm trying to say is when you try to have a uniform sort of, I guess,
Approach.
code or regulation
Mhm.
as it relates to a woman's right to choose.
Mhm.
Because there was a case that came up, I guess, just last week. There was a young girl, I think she was 10 years old,
Mhm.
that was molested
Mhm.
and became pregnant.
Mhm.
She had to leave her state
Mhm.
to seek treatment because in her state, there is no exception
Right.
for rape.
Right.
Now, this law, if it is accepted, says that even though you have been raped, even though you're too young to consent to sex, you're 10 years old, and who knows the dangers of a 10-year-old trying to carry a baby to full term.
Mhm.
Despite that, no, young lady, you're going to have this baby. Not a parental decision, not a decision you've made with your doctor. It is a government decision. I mean, is that what we've come to in America? Is that what we are in this country?
Controlling people, having control of our bodies, our minds, or everything. It's a control mechanism. That's what people don't understand. We are not they don't want us independent thinkers.
Mhm.
They want us to be controlled by a system. And that's exactly what's going on.
Mhm.
Well, isn't this why we point our fingers at China and other places and say, well, what's their track record on civil rights?
Mm.
We talk about China, we talk about Venezuela, we
Mhm.
talk about North Korea.
Mhm.
But I don't know if North Korea has a ban on a woman's right to choose. I don't know if North Korea and Venezuela, Russia, and these other so-called bad places are restricting the right to vote.
Mhm.
I don't know if they have the same problems we have with ethnicity and race
Mhm.
that we have in this country.
Mhm.
This country is leading the world in just so many negative areas. How many places do you see an active shooter a week other than America?
Mhm.
And to say that they want to preserve life by banning abortion, well, what about the life that we have now, the existing life? We're not protecting these children. We don't provide adequate prenatal health care for many women. So I'll pull this up today. So for Black women they're 3 times more likely to die from postpartum complications. And they're saying one of the reasons is structural racism. So if you want to preserve life, why aren't we preserving the lives of these women?
Yep.
You know, it's just insane.
They're not using the statistics. So this is the deal. We already know they don't care about statistics out there. They don't care what the actual numbers show. And I'm an analytical person. I'm about numbers. So to me, I feel that they're working on emotions, on their own personal agendas, and they are not even looking at statistic information to make the right decisions to protect the people of this country, period. And that to me is what's frustrating, because if you really looked at it, if you work in any corporation, and I'll just say, I mean, I work for a large company that we're always looking at analytics to understand how we improve things, right, for our business. This is the same way we need to be approaching the decisions that we're making. And they're not doing that. It's all personal agendas. And whoever's, putting money in their pocket. I will say some of these companies, large companies, when it comes to the decision that was made, they actually told their employees, and our company actually did the same, sent an email out and said, we don't care what the decision was. You have a right with your insurance. We'll protect you if you need to be, if we need to give you money to go to another state because your state doesn't allow abortion, we will provide the resources to be able to do that. These are large corporations doing this. What is this telling you about the decisions that are being made? It's ridiculous.
Well, there's a disconnect between
Absolutely.
the American people and what's going on in the state houses and in Washington.
There isn't just a disconnect. There's a divide.
Yes. Yes.
That's what
it is.
In this country. You said it last week. We've drawn a very clear line.
Yes.
In the sand, and everyone is divided. But what I keep saying to people who are pro-life, I keep saying this is not about you being pro-life. You can be pro-life.
Right.
This is about my right to say no.
To me,
it's your right to say yes.
Right.
We just have the right to choose.
Right.
And these are basic human rights. We even want to say it's women's rights, but these are human rights.
Yes.
I have a right to say yes or no. I have a right to practice autonomy. I have a right to say I'm a Democrat. I have a right to say I'm a Republican.
Yep.
I have a right to say I'm going, I'm not going.
Right.
I have a right to autonomy.
Right.
And so that's what we have to keep pushing with this agenda, that we have to have basic human rights.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Well, for both of you ladies, what do you think is driving this agenda, this whole concept of overturning this decision? What do you think is the heart of the matter?
Can I be honest?
Absolutely.
I think some of it is this up and coming election.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if we pay attention, it's very conveniently always some major issue, right, with rights right before an election. And so this is going to force Republicans who aren't coming out to vote to come out to vote because they want to get this agenda passed. And hopefully it's going to cause some Democrats to come out and say, we can't let this be passed. We need, you and I were talking in the parking lot, we need those 2 seats. Those 2 Republican seats, we need them. And the only way we're going to get them is if we come out and vote. So again, back to what Stefania said, education. And what I'll add to that is mobilization. We have to become mobile. We can't sit home.
Oh, yeah.
We can't do it from the couch.
I'll tell you that my husband and I were having that conversation, and it's to the point where I felt that we lost the battle. But it doesn't mean we can't win the war.
That's
right. So as much as I felt that our voice was not heard because what happened, we mobilized, we were out in the streets, we did everything we could. We felt we could on our end. But it still passed, right? So it still was, So we sit here, and to your point, it's not time to give up. So you can't be complacent. You can't be quiet. You can't just allow this to continue. Yes, the important piece is knowing who, our leaders, what they're voting on, and talk to them and make sure you're making phone calls. However, we also do need to continue to educate and mobilize and come together, because they're depending on us staying quiet.
Mm-hmm.
They're depending on us to feel defeated. To stay defeated.
Divided.
Stay divided as
Mhm.
well. They want this. Division is great for them.
Mhm.
This is why we need to continue to unite, and we need to continue to start talking to people and educating folks and getting out there and just making sure that we try to fix this divide that we have going on. And it's more than just, a race thing. It's religion, it's political, it's a bunch of things. It's social, economic. It's just more pervasive now because of what's transpired over the number of years with our last leader and president. He's only brought out the worst in people, not the best.
I think that this is part of a larger global agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because I read a book, and I think I mentioned it last week. I read a book called The Death of the West by Pat Roberts. And he talked about the population trends moving forward into the 21st century, how Europeans would be a minority in the continent or on the continent of Europe, and how by 2050 in this country, Caucasians would be a minority here.
Mm-hmm.
And the population trends suggest just that.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked it up. So in 1950, per 1,000 women, there were 24.268 births. 2022, it's less than half that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have had zero or negative birth rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're showing some trend upward,
Mm-hmm.
less than 1 percentage point in terms of growth. But if you think about it in terms of the global agenda, going back to the 90s when Bill Clinton was in office, a group of people that we'll call neocons put together a plan that they presented to Bill Clinton.
Mm.
It was called a Project for a New American Century. Bill Clinton rejected that plan. Well, when Bush Jr. was elected president, one of the people that was on board to put it together, this plan, was a man by the name of Dick Cheney, who became the vice president. So the plan was to massively build up our U.S. military. Also, to deny access to other countries, of course, of vital resources, oil, water, gold, things of that nature. To deny access to space, because, of course, from space, we have now space-based military platforms. We can attack other countries using satellites, things of that nature, spy satellites. So we didn't want other people to have that sort of capability so they could rival us. So what we've had since that time has been an agenda of continuous warfare. The idea is war to bring about peace. We all know that war only creates more war, more hostilities, more anger. So, but it's profitable.
Yes.
Because we have so many corporations that are heavily invested in defense.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I guess, the business of killing people.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you fight these wars, these preemptive wars, if we don't have the people to fight?
Mm-hmm.
So we need more people being born in this country. Because, you need more pawns.
Mm-hmm.
You need more people to send out on the front lines, because the corporations aren't going to do it. People, and I was watching, and kind of an aside, I was watching some of the hearings, the January 6th hearings, and prior to, on the night of January 5th, people like Roger Stone, the retired general, Mike something, I can't remember his last name, they held rallies.
Mike Flynn.
I'm sorry?
Mike Flynn.
That's him, Mike Flynn. They held rallies right outside the White House.
Mhm.
Trump could actually hear what they were saying from his window.
Mhm.
Roger Stone was telling people this is a war against good and evil,
Mhm.
against the forces of darkness and light, telling people you have to fight. Well, of course, these people did not go into the Capitol. They told other people to go in, but they went out there. You know, years ago, you had the king would lead his troops into battle.
Mhm.
Now the king hides,
Right.
runs in the other direction.
Mhm. Which is what he did that day.
Well, he said, I'm going to walk down there with you, right? We're
Right.
going to walk down to the Capitol.
Yep.
But he got into the beast, a car, right?
Mhm.
Well, if you're going to walk, why'd you get in the car?
Mhm.
You know, but, you know, these people, they inflame the passions and then they disappear.
Mhm.
You know, and these are the people that are shaping people's minds.
Psychological warfare.
That's what it is. And that's what we're up against. You know, we now, at this stage, are getting much closer, dangerously close to a second civil war in
Yes.
this country.
It's coming.
We fought the first civil war over one issue, and that was the issue of slavery. Now we have a myriad of issues that have us divided.
Mhm.
And in this country, unfortunately, we don't sit down and talk about our issues.
Mhm.
We solve them with guns. And that's where we're headed.
This is where I feel that they took away so much from mental health care and things of that nature. And I feel that this is a part of it, right? Because if we really were dealing with the root cause, we wouldn't be just focusing on the symptoms. And this is where I feel that there's a need
Very good.
for us to dig deeper into what's going on in people's psyche. Because this is what's driving. Because if somebody can manipulate you into believing to follow, I say, a cult leader, there's definitely something inside you broken. And this is how these leaders are able to manipulate people, because they don't think for themselves. They allow these mass crowds and this group think and all this other stuff to take over. So this is bigger. We're not focusing on the healthcare system and what they're taking away from us from that perspective either, or what they have been for many, many years. Think about it. They took a lot of these mental health care institutions many years ago away. You know, so they're not dealing with that. So guess what happens? You got COVID coming. You got people sitting in the house. You got this, you know, you go online. You've got all these things, people telling you and feeding you information. And it's messing with your psyche. And this is where I feel, again, we're focusing so much on these symptoms, which we do need to.
And not the etiology.
But we're exactly. And that's a focus area that we really need to be digging into.
You know, you said something. What you just described was what happened on January 6th.
Absolutely.
People got caught up into the emotion.
Exactly.
You know, the crowd, right? They had been inflamed. And these were average, everyday people, right? Who just said, well, we were summoned here by the President of the United States.
Summoned, exactly.
Yeah. You know, I was watching the hearings the other day, and two of the people that went into the Capitol were there. One was a leader of one of these sort of fringe groups, and another one just a guy who just said he was there because he said, well, listen, we were doing what the president told us to do. He told us to come to Washington. He told us we were going down to the Capitol. So we just got caught up in the emotion, right? And next thing you know, they found themselves going into the Capitol.
While the president sat inside saying,
and watched on TV.
And watched it and waited. People calling him his own. And what was it, after 4:00 when he finally sent a message out and said, "Oh, you're good people, right?" Or whatever is.
Go home in peace. I love you.
I love you.
But the thing is, the people who inflamed the crowd got presidential pardons. Roger Stone, Mike Flynn got presidential pardons. They can never be prosecuted for what they did. But the people who they inflamed, those people are suffering consequences. I mean, that's kind of an aside, but when you talk about charismatic leaders, schools.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the political side of it. It's the religious side of it as well.
Yes.
Because there's supposed to be a separation of church and state.
Mm-hmm.
And now the two have come together
Come
and
together.
they share the same agenda.
Exactly.
Because this Roe v. Wade overturning, a lot of that was pushed by the religious right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who was saying that, you know what, we need to stop this.
Yeah.
So you're concerned about protecting these children.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't say anything when we're bombing away in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
What about those children?
Yep.
What about the children in this country who are starving?
What about the ones that are sitting in foster care that never get adopted? And there's over 100,000 almost daily
Right.
of these children.
We don't care about that.
Nope.
And what about the shootings in the schools?
Yep.
We just had this one in Texas, Connecticut, state after state, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
State after state, we have these active shooter events. We want these children, but we're not doing anything with the children we have here. So, if you advising a young couple who have, say, 2 children and they're barely making it,
Mm-hmm.
you might want to say, listen, you might want to hold off on having another child because you're not able to barely care for the ones you have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in this country, it's the same issue. You want to have more children, but we're barely taking care of the ones we have now. What about them? What about their rights?
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely is a civil rights issue.
Mm-hmm.
What about the rights of these children, right? Not the unborn, but the ones who are here.
Mm-hmm.
Their right to adequate education.
Mm-hmm.
Their right, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. What about that?
Mm-hmm.
For the generations, the younger generations now, what is their future in terms of life in this country? For us, we're all around the same generation. We benefited from the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
So much legislation came out, things like affirmative action,
Mm-hmm.
that Clarence Thomas wants to get rid of,
Yeah.
right? Enough of you.
Because it didn't get him there.
Right.
He
He didn't get nothing from affirmative action. But, that came about. Open up opportunities for jobs, for higher education. When I went to college, listen, everybody was going to college for free. Tap and Pell was pretty easy to get. Well, that window's closing now.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs that years ago, everybody took the civil service exams. Now the competition is getting stiffer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Shifts in population, the pandemic, things are changing.
You know what you make, and this reminds me of what my husband and I, we don't have children, and we never. I have 11 nieces and nephews, so that's enough for us. But we were talking about what is this. For us, we don't regret the choice we made because, first of all, it's if God wanted us to have kids, we would have children.
Right.
That's how we feel. But secondly, we're looking at the way this country's going,
Mm-hmm.
and we're afraid for our youth
Mm-hmm.
that's growing into this country. We talk about this pro-life and bringing more children into this world, and forcing women to have children. However, we're automating processes. We're doing all this stuff. Job market is very hard
Mm-hmm.
to get into because of now they're forcing education to a higher level of education. In some of these corporations. You have a lot of automation going on in some of these distribution centers and things of that nature where, you pretty have more of the other labor, blue collar. So I don't understand the logic because everything is going against each other. It's not even a consistent theme that we can manage through. It's these goals and things that are not even meeting. Where are we going? These children are going to be affected in the future. And I fear for our next generation. I really do. Because I think they're going to struggle.
I'm sorry, Dan.
No, we need to fear because Gen Z is already a mess.
Yeah.
They're already a mess.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what the next generation is going to bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Because even at work, I'm at work and I see the Gen Z people coming on board, right? They stay for a month.
Oh, they're moving around.
Yeah. If they're not the president, they're out of there. They want to be the president of the one. It's a completely different world.
Yeah, it is. It's almost like I'm coming in and I deserve to be a manager like right now. It took me 15 years to get to where I'm at right now, and 15, 20, and it's moving up in the order. No, after a month or two, they're like, I'm not getting what I want. There's another opportunity that I'm going to go for, and you're not, they're not lifers. We're pretty much lifers. We stay where we are. But yeah, I don't know what this next. I fear for the next generation. We have a responsibility to try and help steer for a better future for our children. So this is the focus that we have to get into. But there's so many layers to this that it's very difficult unless we have people in place, leaders in place that can focus and come together to address all the layers. It's too much. I feel it's overwhelming at this stage. If you start looking at all the pieces that are going to be coming into this, from road down the line, I think we're going to destroy this country if we continue to go this path.
Well, something. You mentioned something about you don't understand the logic, because there is no logic.
There is no exactly.
We have part of this country, or there are people, should I say, in this country and around the world, that believe that this planet is overpopulated. We need to drastically reduce the world's population. And they have been trying it. Things like the AIDS epidemic, things like the crack epidemic, things like the opioid epidemic, and now the pandemic, right? So there's people that want to remove people off the planet. And then you have people saying we're going to force people to bring life onto the planet. There's no logic.
Exactly.
And here's the worst part of this for me. This is what sounds the worst to me. You want to force people to bring life here that don't want to bring life here. You want to manipulate and control what form of birth control they use to not bring life here. You want to control and manipulate people's right to and as far as I'm concerned, a blessing to go and seek out fertility treatments. All of these things are encompassed in this whole Roe thing. And it's just dictatorship and control.
Exactly.
And yet we are living in a country where families can't provide basic needs.
Yes.
And we want to control something like this. Is craziness.
And we've got all these prices going up on food. You can't even find, I was shopping the other day and I'm looking and I'm like, there's a lot of food items that aren't even available. So here we are, we're trying to bring children into this world, and right now, granted, it could change down the road, but we can't, to your point, you can't even provide the basic needs to your own family, let alone bringing another child into this world. The formula situation, right? The baby formula situation, all these things are in contrast of one another. Fix the problems of this world, this country first.
Which I think there are 2 Republican senators that voted against increasing the amount of baby formula available.
Yes.
So you want to force women to have the children, but you are not going to increase the amount of baby formula.
192 Republicans voted to not fund the baby formula.
Right.
So
but you want babies.
You want babies, but you just don't want to feed them. Right. No logic.
Nothing.
It's just insane that in this country we are on the precipice of a dictatorship. Our leaders would put, Adolf Hitler and Mussolini to shame in their thinking. It's so draconian. I just think, now you said something last week. I think that the churches across this nation need to be more proactive. I think we need to stop talking about pie in the sky and talk about what's going on down here on earth, right? Because we have to live here. I don't care, you can talk about what you're going to do in the by and by, but right now, this country, your rights are being taken away. This country is falling into a very dark place, and praying isn't going to do it. The focal point of the civil rights movement was the church. Dr. King could not have done what he did without the assistance of the church.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what we need. We need to bring awareness to people. Instead of saying, look, just pass that collection plate and take the money and run, we need to tell the people to be aware, to be vigilant, to fight like hell. Because these decisions not only affect you, but will affect generations to come. So we got to wake up, folks.
And newsflash to the church leaders, your daughter may need to get an abortion. Newsflash.
Mm-hmm.
Your daughter might be that 10-year-old who was perpetrated on by one of your members and may need to get an abortion. And so the church just has to, it's like I said last week, we can't be so heavenly that we know earthly good.
Right.
People are going to get abortions.
Right.
Whether you agree with it or not,
Absolutely.
they're going to get abortions. But we want to stop the back alley
Yes.
abortions.
Right.
Yes.
The abortions with hangers that prevent people from ever having children.
Right.
Right.
This is the stuff that we want to prevent. We want to prevent, in the mental health field, we talk about people who commit suicide reach a place of hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
That's the correlation between suicide and feeling hopeless is that, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have young women, middle-aged women, and in some cases, women my age can still have children, right? That don't want to have children or aren't in a position to take care of children, and you force them to have kids, that whole mental health piece comes in too. Because when you can't provide, that's feeling hopeless.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you can't provide basic needs, you feel hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And so mental health issues, they're going to surge. You're going to see suicides surge. You're going to see, it's going to be a mess. The potential.
It's already a mess. I mean, I guess what we're heading for is complete chaos.
Yeah. This is the calm before the storm.
Mm-hmm.
And the storm is going to hit very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Very hard. It's almost a re-cleansing of, which I don't think it's cleansing anything. It's almost like a re-cleansing to what these dictators want
Mm-hmm.
this world to be, or this country to be. That's what it is.
And moving forward, so we have the midterm elections coming up in November.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's going to be some drastic shifts.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the Democrats are going to lose their majority in the Senate or in the House. Already, I think it's Senator Leahy has been out with health issues, so they already have lost the majority until he returns. But with the economy being in its current state, gas prices, and so many other domestic issues, the Democrats are basically, their name is mud.
Right now. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of these Trump Republicans will be getting into office.
Yeah, because they're saying, see what happened?
Right.
You put
Mhm.
Biden in place, and look what's happening.
Yeah.
Gas prices gone up. You can't get food. The formula issue, all this other stuff. However, going back to what you said, Romane, was the voting that occurred in the Senate that stopped for the ability with the formula to provide more. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't believe people are paying attention enough. They're focusing again on the symptom. They're not focusing on how people are voting and what's going on, because there are things going on that they're just not aware of, or they just don't care. They just, it's easy for somebody to tell you something.
It's not that they don't, I wouldn't say that they don't care. What I would say it is the power of suggestion.
Yeah.
If you repeat something over and over and over, people will take in that information, becomes reality to them. So what happens is, since 1980, we've had something called a 24-hour news cycle. How many people sit there and watch something like Fox News for hours? They're repeating the same stories. The same exact story over and over and over. And people sit there glued to their television set. And they're being indoctrinated.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Right? So what happens is they don't focus on what's going on.
No.
They just focus on what they're programmed to say.
Mhm.
And when you focus on people, you know the program they're watching because they use the same verbiage.
Mhm.
But they don't validate. There's no validation.
But they don't need to
No, because they're
nobody questions them.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so
Exactly.
Well, I would want to challenge the church.
Yeah.
That if you want to stand on this pro-life thing, this is to the church leaders. You want to stand on this pro-life thing, then be willing to stand on the belief that you are going to relinquish the fancy cars and the high revenue that you are earning from the churches and surrender it to the single parent households who you're going to force to have children.
Yep.
And let the church take care of them. Because
Yep.
back, you know, the beginning of public welfare was the church's responsibility
Yep.
anyway.
Mhm.
So if you are so, for lack of a better term, hell-bent on maintaining this pro-life stand, then be willing to stand on that and say, I'm not going to take a salary. Everything that comes into the church after we pay overhead is going to be relinquished over to single parent households within their individual communities. And let them take care of it, since you want them here.
Well, we both know that's not going to happen.
No.
Well, I would challenge that.
And we also know that a lot of these women on the religious right are going to be in the same situation as the woman in the poor community who's faced with an unwanted pregnancy.
Mhm.
Do you think they're not going to abort those children? They will do so privately,
Oh, absolutely.
just like we've been doing for years.
Absolutely.
They won't have a record that we can go and look up.
Mhm.
But it's the same situation. And people need to understand this is the new civil rights struggle. We have been at war for some time, and people are just waking up. And we have been at war for years now. And what happened on January 6th, we think it's all about Donald Trump. It's not. Some of what happened with those people, just utter frustration. The same old in Washington, year in and year out. And Donald Trump could not have been elected president if he did not strike a chord with those people. Something Donald Trump talked about, making America great again, providing jobs, American jobs, taking care of home first, is something that politicians have forgotten. And Donald Trump preyed upon that. And he was very successful and remains so. So, folks, you know what? Another hour has gone by, and it goes by so quickly, especially when we're talking about important and serious issues. And that's something we need to discuss more. Let's stop talking about who's beefing on Facebook. I mean, really. Let's stop twerking on Facebook and social media.
They still twerking?
Oh, yeah. They're twerking hard. Let's stop doing that.
Instead of twerking
They're
hard.
twerking hard. Let's come to the realization that this is the civil rights struggle for this generation. And you're not going to twerk your way to freedom. You're not going to beef your way to freedom. We've got to come together. We have to fight this thing. Or if we don't, there'll be nothing worth fighting for.
That's right.
Yep.
Dr. King gave us a reminder. It's left up to us now. The torch has been passed. So for you young people, listen, if you're going to go on those cell phones, which is your best friend nowadays, look up the civil rights struggle. Find out from where we've come and where we need to go. So I thank you all for listening. Stefani, I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Stefani is from the sistership. You will hear her tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Yes, we'll be on tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard
You
Time.
will hear her tomorrow. So please tune in to the sistership and continue to listen to us on Saturday mornings. Wake up with us. Thank you, folks, and thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Carpe diem,
Pleasure.
people.
All righty.